Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask Dr. Be Good show, the show where we share the practice, the pedagogy, and the politics of what currently is going on in public education. As always, I ask that you write your name in the comments when you come in and let me know your thoughts, your observations, and your questions about the topic being discussed. I'm a longtime teacher, so I know that having an active participating class during the show is sort of important to me. Even if you listen later, you can still pop in your questions because I'll get notified and I'll respond back. So it's a win-win whether you listen now live or you listen later. Let me know your thoughts, let me know your questions, and we'll get back to you. Now let's get started. We have with us our longtime friend, long time to you all, but even longer to me. Karla Smith is a longtime friend of mine from back in, 2001 now. And so, Karla, talk a little bit about your background and how you are a friend to us here on the show.
Well, it was 20 years ago now that you scooped me up at a job fair. I was recruited by Dr. Good from the Catholic Diocese, actually, and I've never turned back. This is my home. So for 20 years now, I've been teaching science in Dallas ISD, primarily middle school. When not teaching 8th grade, I have done 5th, but always right there at the cusp of the ever-evolving state assessments from time.
Yeah, we know we still have those, don't we?
Yeah, so that's where I'm at.
And so before we sort of delve into the topics that I brought you on, which is discipline and grading, I know grading is a hot topic everywhere. I saw it on the news last night. I'm going to be talking about it in my district tomorrow morning at staff meeting. You said it's a hot topic, and then disciplining during the pandemic, right? Because things are different. Not everybody's face-to-face. We've got half the kids or more at home. But before we get started on that, and I asked Karla to sort of stay and be with us during the early part of the show too, so that as a teacher in the field, she can give us insight into some of what I'm going to be talking about and bringing you. And that is tracking how the coronavirus is impacting the school districts across the country. So, you know, we tend to live in a bubble here, and we tend to forget about what's happening in the rest of the country, but we really should try to keep track of you know, the fact that we're not alone in this, and that should make us feel a little bit comforted, at least, that we have educators all across the country going through this and coming up with some good solutions, by the way. It's not only a dear me situation. We do have solutions going on everywhere. But let's talk a little bit about what the pandemic has brought as far as our lunch program, for example. Some of you may remember the EBT program that brought a card with extra funding for parents. And we had that, I think, late summer. And they're talking about bringing that back, but guess what? They're talking about the bureaucracy that's involved in trying to bring that back. Surprise, surprise. And so we'll see how good the Biden administration can be to cut through some of that very severe bureaucracy that is our national lunch program, and you know, see how quickly we can get help, especially for those kids under 6. We don't have all of our kids in school. Of course, we have kids who are our youngest ones are still at home. Many of our kids don't start school till 4 or 5 years of age. And so making sure that everybody gets fed has been an on again, off again. I called our lunch person before going on the show just to make sure my facts were straight. And he said, you know, 1 minute we get to feed every kid, another minute we don't. And so that's been our up and down life. And I don't know, Karla, if you've been able, from your teacher chair and in your building, been able to get an impact of how the lunch program is working for y'all. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, as of now, I'm not exactly sure how the kids who are at home are accessing the resources. I know it is available, and I know that they have schedules where they can come up and receive a week's worth of food. I don't see it happening. Of course, I'm in my classroom, but I don't know if students are still utilizing it as much as they were, say, in the summer or last spring. I know our cafeteria is making these bundles. I'm just not exactly sure what percentage of kids started out using the resources and who are still using them. Because of course we've got some kids back face to face and they get breakfast and lunch here anyway.
Right, we do too. We have 100% free lunch and free breakfast, lunch and breakfast, but
Mhm.
our numbers are down. I hope your numbers are not down, but ours are down as far as people picking stuff up. You know, we really need to take advantage of the resources to help our kids. Sometimes we have pride, and so, you know, my hope is that all of our kids in our communities are getting fed. Another thing that's happening that you may have been seeing, I know I have, and that is where our teens have gone to work, right? They're home and they now are seeing that their parents aren't working, some of them, and they've gone back to work and their schoolwork is suffering. Have you even seen that in the middle school?
I'll tell you what I've seen more than that is students who can't log on because they've got a house full of kids that they are now taking care of because they cannot afford daycare and the parents are working an additional job. I'm sure some of my students may be working as well, but a lot of them are saying, I can't be on the Zoom or I can't have my camera on because I've got, cousins and brothers, sisters, all of that.
Yeah, lots of SEL issues, family issues that are impacting learning. Now in the LA school district, speaking of trying to get kids back in school, they're saying that their kids are not going to come back to school until they can require a vaccine. Now, isn't that interesting? So it says here the superintendent from the LA Unified School District says that for students to return to school's coronavirus immunization must be required. No different than students being vaccinated for measles or mumps. We know that's the best way to keep everyone on campus safe. So unfortunately, we don't think, I'm hearing, at least nothing I'm reading is saying that that's going to be sooner rather than later. For example, the Pfizer vaccine is authorized for kids 16 and up, but it isn't expected to be available until late 2021.
Mm-hmm.
The Moderna vaccine is not supposed to be available to kids until 2022. So goodness gracious, that's who knows when those California kids are going to go back.
Right.
So when and under what circumstances schools should reopen remains a point of contention in districts nationwide. Matter of fact, I had a reporter call me a few minutes before coming on the show. They're from North Carolina. Those schools are not open yet. And so we have different priorities in different states as far as reopening. So scientists at Duke University and the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill recently published in the American Academy of Pediatrics that there's a low incidence of in-school transmission of COVID-19 when safety measures are in place. Unfortunately, I will tell you that when I'm having to close down part of my schools, it's because a parent has brought a kid or kids to school that are sick. Have you had that happen where you've had sick kids brought to school and they end up having COVID?
We have, and then we end up with the subsequent staff members who end up getting it. It's kind of that chain reaction. Fortunately, it seems to be tapering off. At one point, we had 19 of our staff out.
Wow.
19. And we don't have a lot of kids. I mean, today, I think I had 3 kids, 5 kids. I think my biggest class might be 7 kids out of the 25. Mostly, I have Zoom only students. Most of my students I've never ever seen in person. So that's really tough to build relationships. You have to be creative. I've never met them. And some kids I've never actually seen because they have devices that they say the camera doesn't work. I don't know if that's true or if they just don't want to turn it on. But either way, I wouldn't recognize my own students if they walked down the hallway, if they were to show up in person. So that's a little bit strange. Yes.
Now, are you finding, and this is not a scientific study or correlation, but are you finding that kids who don't put on their cameras tend to have lower grades?
I'm going to be honest and confess right now. there's very few kids who don't turn on the cameras because I have that as a requirement. They have to turn on the camera, but they can be wherever. They can go sit on the patio. I don't care what the background is. And I've even taught them how to change the background if they want it to just be some generic cool background that they created themselves. But the reason for that, even if it's pointing at the ceiling and I can just see a part of it, they like to do the eyes only. And so you're just looking at them and the ceiling. Because I have to know you're there. Because what happens is I'm asking Rebecca, what do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And then they don't answer. And what's happened is kids have gone back to bed or they're playing a video game. They're not even on there. And I can see on the Nearpod, you know, how he's got the panel where you can see everybody typing. They're not typing. They're actually not engaged. They just logged on to the Zoom to get counted present. So I've got to have the camera, even if you turn on your camera intermittently and I see you and it's not on 100% of the time, I have to do that. I didn't at first, but when I saw how many kids were just logging onto the Zoom and going back to bed or going to watch TV, or I see the flickering on their face because they're on their phone and they're watching something. So their grades were bad because they were just distracted.
So there's not a correlation between whether they're showing their screen or not showing. It's whether they're engaged. End of story.
And you know what? I hate to say it, but as the department head at my school, when the numbers come back in and then I hear the teachers, well, and then the litany of the but, you already know. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, so the kids didn't like what you did. I mean, I get that you thought you taught it, but that's like saying you won the Oscar before the results have come in. You don't get to claim that victory unless the data supports it. So when the numbers are what they are, those are your numbers and that's your mirror. So you've got to get better faster, as Paul Bambrick loves to say in his book. You got to get better faster. And
so here's what happens. Meanwhile, a new estimate from nonprofit consulting firm Education Resource Strategies suggests catching students up academically in the wake of the pandemic could cost an average of $12,000 to $13,500 per student over the next 5 years. I guess that would be bringing in, tutoring costs and Saturday school and, extra personnel. So this is a continued issue that we have to contend with. And until all of our teachers understand that they have got to be at their dead level best, and whether the kids are online or not, right? And if not this, then what mentality. We had one teacher, a science teacher, matter of fact, Miss Morgan, I remember her saying that she fought it mentally at first, and then when she embraced the concept of, okay, this is what I have to do, then it became easier. And so everybody does that at a different time, right?
That sounds like something Yvonne Morgan would say. Were you talking to Yvonne Morgan by chance?
No.
No.
This is somebody closer to me.
So. Okay, because I'm in a bunch of focus groups that DISD has on, do we do the intercession model? Do we do year round? Do we do the tutoring? And so I kind of meet with a lot of our top brass, and they kind of handpick, people from across the district to really see, okay, what do you think would work? So if you're known to be able to deliver at a certain level, then chances are you would be honest to say, I can or can't accomplish said goals in this amount of time under these circumstances, or I can. And how realistic is that to implement across the district? Do we need more time, or do we need better skill sets in the teachers? Because it's always easy to say the kids are behind, but the fact is a lot of the teachers are lagging way behind technology-wise, not knowing content. It's harder to fake it when you've got an audience watching through the screen.
Funny you should say that. I'm a magistrate on the tribunal process for truancy, and what we're finding is that it's the shadows come to light when it comes to when you have a strong truancy process in place, which I've talked about before in the show. It sort of opens up the shadows. We know which kids aren't showing up for what period they don't like, right? They may be showing up for you because they like you, but they're not showing up regularly for the teacher in 8th period, versus teachers who are not taking attendance. And so that we're seeing all those things bubble up to the surface. But anyway, in the news, we're also having a proposal in some states to test every student and teacher in the nation for COVID every week. What do you feel? How do you feel about that? What if we were to say, hey, just part of your school day is every Monday you go in for a COVID test?
Well, I would personally say that that's a lot of time and resources that I would rather see invested into getting the round 1A and 1B people vaccinated in the first place. We're doing all this testing, but yet wouldn't it be great if we didn't have people signing up with a 20,000 person waiting list? So I would say right now what we need more of is infrastructure on how to get the vaccine out for the people who want it. Now I get it, some people don't want it, but a lot of people do, and they claim they just can't get vaccinated.
Well, one of my big pushes have been, and I've done it myself. I did it this week as I wrote the governor. I wrote my legislators where I'm the constituent, and the legislators of my schools sit in, to ask them to please consider. They would have to write the governor to get him to move teachers to up the levels, and they all wrote me back, which was very nice. But so we do have some of that push going on, but until we can get the adults feeling safer, we're still going to have trouble manning every classroom. I mean, we have 7 or 8 teachers with notes from their doctors, and you know, that's 70 or 80 kids that we can't serve because it's about 10 or 12 per teacher, right now. And that's, you know, I'll tell you, in Michigan, for example, Michigan just moved their teachers up, so they're excited about that. And in Chicago, I don't know if you've read about Chicago, but Chicago has been virtual. They were supposed to have face-to-face back February 1st, only no teachers are showing up. And so the teacher unions there have said, until we get a vaccine, we're not having our teachers come back. So goodness gracious, there's a lot of things going on to mitigate that, getting back to face-to-face and whatever normalcy people think they're going to get. That's for a discussion for a different show, but we're never going to get back to the old days. I don't, just yes or no, Karla, master teacher, are we ever going to go back to the old days, the way it was before now, pandemic? What do you think?
No, and there's some good and bad to that. One, there's efficiency levels that I personally have gained 26 years in, and now I can do stuff that I would be silly to go back to the analog way of doing things. The things that do need to go back eventually are things like the hands-on, the cooperative grouping, like the labs. My students not being able to do labs most days personally is robbing them of what science even is. So that needs to come back someday. But the old just copy everything off of the transparency back in the day. No. Now we can just you slip and slide and give you all the stuff you need right in your slide deck and move it, keep it moving. So there are definitely ways that we shouldn't go back, even if we could.
So before we move on to our topic, I wanted to touch base because we're still new into the post-inauguration early Biden days. And so Biden has announced some executive actions meant to help reopen schools. And I think that we've all heard President Biden call the reopening of schools a national emergency, and said that he wants to see K-12 schools in the United States open within his first 100 days, which his first 100 days would make it between now and April. Now, we all know that every teacher will not get, and I shouldn't even say teacher because it's really educators, right? Would our custodians need it? Yes. Would our food service need it? Yes. Those have been some of the people that have triggered our school closings because they hit so many kids, right, during the course of a day. And so they would need it as much as our teachers would. But to get a vaccine between now and April, I don't see it happening, unfortunately.
And you can open schools. We're open now. Any of our students can come. They're not coming. So there's a big difference between opening schools. You cannot mandate a student to be there. Well, you could theoretically, but that doesn't mean they're going to show up. And our parents have said, I'm not sending my kid back for the rest of this school year. They're not willing to say what they're going to do next fall. They're open to whatever. That's to, cart before the horse. But many of our parents in our PTA meetings was like, no way am I sending my kid back. And how would you force them? You can't. So we're going to have to keep doing what we're doing now, regardless of if only half of the kids come or 80%, you still have to serve the 20 that are not here. So
that's, that's what I tried to tell the reporter that I was talking to before the show, in the sense of, it's not that, especially, our schools are open.
mm-hmm.
Texas, we have open schools, but I said 30% of our kids have come to school. The other 70%, the parents have kept home because they just don't feel it's safe enough yet. And so, we've tried that. It's you guys have closed school there by choice for right now. We've actually opened it, and they're still not coming, and by huge numbers, right? Which is, again, not necessarily terrible because of the spatial distancing thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have enough classrooms for every single kid to come to school right now if we have to keep it 10 or 12 to a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of those dilemmas, right? One of the things that Biden and his educational department have said that they're going to do is more personal protective equipment, that they would pay for more of that. I don't see that necessarily as a big problem right now. Our Texas Education Agency has sent us gazillion gloves that I don't really see being used by many people. Face masks, yes. Sanitizer, for sure, yes. But I'm not really seeing that is going to make the difference between school being safe and not safe. More testing, yes. We definitely need to have more. Well, I say that. We have to be careful between saying that we're testing for corona and doing the vaccine, right? So do you have a school nurse in your school that can give the quick COVID test?
I had it. Yeah, I had it, not this Monday, but the one before, and I didn't suspect that I had that, but I had some other stuff, my blood pressure medication I started taking. But either way, because there were some symptoms that could be, just in case, they just said, well, we're just gonna, test you. And 15 minutes later, she said, I knew you didn't have it. And I go, well, you tested me, so you didn't know, but just in case. That's what was good. When you have some, even if it's just a few of the symptoms on the list that could be from a lot of different things, it is nice to know that I'm not putting my colleagues and my students at risk by being here and waiting till I'm, so sick that I have to get sent home with a fever. So yeah, we have 2 nurses actually.
Yeah, and we do too. I mean, I think most school districts have moved to that, to where they actually can test kids. Now, the teachers are a little bit less reluctant than parents to let us test. I wish that we could get teachers to feel more comfortable letting us test them weekly, only to get in that habit of, because every once in a while you will catch somebody who's asymptomatic, right? And so it would allow us to find that person occasionally. But I wish the parents were a little bit better about letting us test kids, because maybe, again, we'd catch those asymptomatic kids. Not what we've told parents is send your child to school unless they have a fever. The fever is the deal breaker. And so, unfortunately, they keep forgetting that part. And so that's why we do tend to catch them when they are in the car, and we do the thermometer against the forehead, which still makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I wish we had different ones, but again, that's a different cost, and we have what we have. But one day, Karla, we sent home 30 kids one day with slight fevers. That's now, that was out of 300 or 400 kids, but I mean, that's how much one of our schools is in a real hot spot. And so that's how much we're really having to be careful. So up to now, we haven't had much data from the federal government. I don't know if you know that Education Secretary DeVos didn't really feel like her department's role was to keep track of the student and staff corona numbers in each state. I think that's going to change now. And a lot of states are doing it on their own, but I did a show last week or the week before, which showed a chart, dashboard, which had what states did have a dashboard that we could tap into and which ones didn't. And so there were still about 17 schools, I think, that did not have any corona data to at least announce federally. And so you can see how frustrating it is when we're trying to talk at a federal level, at a national level, about whether it's the coronavirus continues to be a problem, right? When you don't have a federal dashboard to populate. So that's been very frustrating. So I think that's one of the things that will be changing soon. College access, we know, we've heard about the student loans, right? There will be a moratorium on continuing the student loans, I believe. So that's coming. Oh, so much to keep track of. And then on top of it are the everyday things. The everyday things like grading and discipline, right? So let's talk, well, first of all, the reason I thought about talking to you about grading is because I heard on the news last night the big district close to us was announcing a grade policy change, and that is due to the pandemic. They were asking their teachers to continue to accept redos on assignments and on tests until the end of the semester, so that kids had a chance to up their grades. And that, that district was just a continuation of other issues that we're seeing, grading issues across the country. What are you seeing in your schools?
Well, that is something I have always done anyway, so I'm not offended, though I definitely get pushback from colleagues. But having been all these years in Title I schools and with underserved populations, we have the equity piece that always rears its ugly head. And one of the ways that I try and level the playing field is when a kid finally decides it's 6 weeks late and they decide, you know what, I have buy-in now. They don't know me in the first 6 weeks. They get to know me. They decide, okay, I believe that you are here to support me. I believe that you're not going to be another person who gave up on me, because I push and push and push kids. And when I finally get them to do something, I don't want them to say, well, it's too late. I can't save my grade now. I've already failed because I haven't done anything. I want to now. So I try and show grace anyway. When you decide it's time, how motivated are you going to be? Well, too late. I've already entered all the grades. I don't know too many adults who could deliver at that level, that you better not mess up and you better just do everything right by a certain deadline. Some of us now can't even keep our houses clean on a time. We just have to be more flexible. That's me, but that approach has worked for a very long time. And in the end, when it comes time to testing, kids try harder when they know that I am willing to bend and flex when I see effort. Now, if you don't want to do anything and you want to try anything, I'll give you what you have coming, that's for sure. But sometimes when a light comes on and it's a slow flame and it's a slow flicker, I want to get that brighter and brighter and grow it, not squelch it by saying, well, should have done that a month ago, darling. Sorry, you've already failed this semester. So to me, I like that now they're requiring teachers to do that more, because sometimes that's the only hope some students have. I don't think that kids should just get away with not doing any work. I mean, when they're in my class, I expect them to do work, and I'm monitoring right then and there. I don't just say, okay, get that done. I'm watching. What I'm talking about is they didn't get the assignment turned in. They didn't get the homework, whatever it was. In class, I'm going to get the work out of you no matter what, because it's no opt out.
So you remember that last year during the COVID semester, we were told, and we told teachers to use the word grace, to have grace, have grading empathy, that a lot of districts went to pass fail. We did not. We didn't think that was a good practice, but a lot of districts did. And now here we are at the start. I know that I did it. I think it was out there in the general news that school districts were mandated by the state of Texas to go back to their regular grading policy, pre-COVID policy, which was, of course, to not be as lenient and to, again, adhere to grading deadlines. And so now what we're seeing this first semester of 2021 is that we have a whole lot more D's and F's all over the country. Let's see, we have in the first grading period, in a challenging school year, districts discovered a concerning rise in D's and F's, despite efforts to create small in-person learning groups, extra tutoring times for struggling learners, and other supports. For example, Sweetwater Union High School District in Chula Vista, California released data that shows an 8% point increase in D's and F's over the last school year. And frankly, I think that's sort of low. So then in Fairfax, Virginia, the first quarter grades for middle and high school found an 83% increase in F's compared to the first grading period in the last year. So that's a wake-up call, right?
Oh, for sure. And some of it is that the way that instruction is being delivered does not match what is needed by our audience. So if you just upload a bunch of worksheets to your online platform and expect that to take the place of authentic, rigorous teaching, then that is not going to work. And for me, when I would let kids do things and redo it again, for our district, you are supposed to let kids, we have up until the 6 weeks, they can turn in work late and they can redo tests. And so that's the deadline for me. I don't go back once the 6 weeks, or in this case, 9 weeks, we've switched to 9 weeks. Once that ends, I don't go back. I'm not going to change the grade book. But let's say week 4 of the term of a 9-week term, you decide you want to go back and do the first month because you realize you were checked out and now you've decided to get motivated. I will go back and take that, because here's the bottom line. You have to decide, what was the point of assigning the work? Was it to help a student grow and to assess whether they have been successful? So if they want to show, yes, I've been successful and I want to grow, why would I stop them from doing that? That's something that I just don't believe in myself, because at the end of the day, if I want you to be at master's level, then you have to start. And so if I can't get you to start, I can't get you to master's. So I'll show you that grace. And once I do that, I've got buy-in, and that happens most years, because kids, think about this. In science, kids often think, I'm not good at this, I can't do science. They're not familiar with doing labs, and that's really not their fault. So they come digging their heels in because they're scared to death of it. So at first is when I'm most lenient in there, trying to acclimate and realize, you know what, maybe I can do that. I'm building them up. I'm trying to build their self-efficacy up. And sometimes just shutting a kid down, well, they already came that way. They're not, you know, so it's one of those things. If I got you working in class, I never ever let you sit and not work during class. But some of the homework piece, you know, is less is less important. We've only got that counting as 10% of our grade. So you're not supposed to be able to fail a kid just for not doing their homework when they're working their tail off. But like you said, some of them have to go home and work with their dad painting houses or whatever. I won't fail a kid because they don't do homework when I see them working their tail off in class. So I will take those assignments late because a lot of times they're working, cleaning houses with mom. They're watching their little brothers and sisters, but they in school, they do more. At home, they do less. A lot of with our students, a lot of times it's not their option. They're told they have to cook the dinner and do the laundry and change the diapers. And I just don't think that's fair.
So let's talk a little bit about what's happening across the country, and then let's chat about whether you think those were equitable changes to ask teachers to make. So, you know, there's a reluctance to change the grading practice because A through F and 0 through 100 point system is so ingrained and so nearly universally understood and used, right? And I use that understood sort of cautiously. That's what we've always done. I think that there's a lot of room for understanding how to do it better or differently, but at any rate, at the high school level, grade point averages are used for class rankings, course promotions, athletic participation, college applications, and scholarship opportunities. Grading is also one of the only autonomous activities that teachers have. And while local and state school systems typically provide guidance for grading structures such as numerical range to use for letter grades and course promotion requirements, the grading of daily assignments and tests and end of course grades is solely the duty of the classroom teacher. Teachers of early elementary grades typically don't give A through F, but instead provide feedback on progress through the narratives, right? Satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and so forth. But a few school systems are starting to tweak their grading approaches due to the pandemic. So let's say in Georgia, the State Board of Education has approved a change that reduces the percentage weight that the Georgia milestone end of course assessments will count on a child's final grade. So it used to be 20%. Let's see, the statewide passing score typically places that percentage weight at 20%, but for this year only, the percentage weight will count as a 0.01 minimum of a student's final grade in the course. That sounds a little low, doesn't it? Looks like they didn't do it. I bet they get a lot of pushback on that from teachers. And New York City Public Schools is allowing schools to set their own grading scale, such as a 1.4, a numerical scale of 0, or an A through system. And the district also is allowing flexibility for families in how final grades are reflected on a student's academic record, plus other allowances. This is going to make it hard for colleges, you know that? The San Unified School District recently changed its grading policy in an attempt to be more equitable and to assess students in their assessment of student achievement. The revised system requires teachers to assign letter grades for students based on mastery of content and allow for reflection, revision, and reassessment. In order to reach mastery levels, separate citizenship grades will be issued to students based on behaviors such as being prepared for class and participating in discussions. And that's huge. Most people don't understand that. We've had to sort of retrain a lot of teachers who want to punish kids who they show up, but because the teachers don't like the quality of the work handed in, they count the kids as absent when it's in a virtual environment. And so we've had to say, they handed it in, they gave you what at the time they considered their best work, we hope. Just because you didn't feel it was their best work doesn't mean that you get to still count them as absent. That becomes a behavior issue or a work instructional issue versus an attendance issue. You know, and one of the big sections in this article, and it's in almost every article that I read about discipline and grading and almost anything else, frankly, the inequities piece, right? And that is that kids of color, kids with disabilities, guess what? They are having to have the lowest grades. They have the toughest attendance. Oftentimes they don't feel good about themselves. And so they tend not to show up as regularly. And so that's where a huge piece of this new understanding of how to reach kids at home needs to be. So are you in your school having meetings with teachers? And I don't mean you directing them, but are your administrators having meetings with teachers around how to reach kids who are not handing in work or having good grades?
Yeah, we do pod meetings because we're podded where you have a content teacher, um, reading, math, science, social studies, and then the elective teachers are cross-podded. But when we do meetings with parents on Zoom, we have a roster and then we block them. Okay, we're going to meet with this kid, this kid, this kid, and we share our screens and show the parent their Google Classroom, and they'll say, "Well, they're on the computer all day. I thought they were working." Well, that doesn't mean anything. Do you know what they were doing on the computer all day? Yeah, so we get that a lot. We get parents saying, "That's not true. I saw him log on. He was on that computer all day long." When that does not mean anything, as we well know. So yes, we have to do a lot of meetings and calls. And I'm the one who, I've got my phone right here. I'll take a picture of the kids' work as I'm going. I've got the panel of Nearpod and I'll zoom in on theirs and it shows they haven't even opened the document. That's awaiting. Okay. And then you do that a lot. And then you put them as attachments in an email and the parents are shocked. And next thing you know, little Susie and Johnny are on there and ready to go. And then the key part to me is then you say, "Oh, you're here. Oh my gosh, it's so great to see you, Becky. Wonderful. Oh, look what you did. Oh, thank you." And then you just go with what you want. What you feed grows and what you starve dies. And so I feed the behavior that I want. So when you were mentioning the kids with disabilities, I have a class that is literally half sped, and that's my most vibrant, most participatory, most fun class because they don't have to be shut down or self-conscious or that's not the right answer. It's the idea of it's okay if it took me a little longer. It's okay if I didn't say it just right. It's okay. And those kids thrive with the idea of I can be me. I don't have to have it just one way. And so when I do choice boards, they can pick what they feel is they're featuring their best work, how they want to show it, whether it's a drawing or whether it's, so I'm all about project-based learning and choices, and they'll do a video on Flipgrid and we can all comment on each other. I just think that we should be applauding each other more, and that will help kids show up to your class. I don't have a big absentee rate. I don't have a big failure rate, and my scores are beating the district. So yes, I let kids do things over because that's what I have to do. When I go, I don't know why the Nearpod's not working. What if I got a bad grade? What if my evaluator came in and said, nope, up, and then wrote a bad grade? When I go, okay, sorry guys, let me try this one more time. Okay, now can you write on the slides? Oh, thank goodness. I had to do that 3 times. I think it was yesterday. It wasn't working. I would hope that the kids didn't kick me out of the Zoom because I couldn't do it right. It's just silly sometimes.
So what do you think about using incomplete as a placeholder? Is that something you do?
We actually are told we can't do that because then it won't show that they're failing. It sort of like freezes it in our system. So what we do, we are told we can't put zeros. So if I have a kid, I've got, I think 2 that I've never seen ever. And we've called and we've done all of that. So rather than give them straight zeros, none of the teachers have any work from the kid. We can put 50s or 60s, so it still shows that they're getting a progress report that's failing. But if they were to engage and say, okay, I finally came out of the catacombs, whatever reason, and we've had kids do that, they can bring a 60 up. You can't bring a 0 up. No matter what you do, 100 and a 0, it's a 50. So I won't give them the actual failing grade, because if the point is, okay, you need to fail the course, you haven't done any work, a 69 is still failing. I don't have to give you a 0, because then when you do decide to come, or when you're forced to come, and then they show up, you show up with your backpack face to face. Oh, there you are. How can you bring up a 0? You can't.
No, that's good math, and that's a great That's a great argument for teachers why you shouldn't give zeros, because you always want to build in hope. And so, because time is never our friend, let's go ahead and talk about discipline on top of this, because this veers over, right, with kids not doing what they're supposed to be doing, not coming online. And so there was a real discipline crisis before the pandemic with kids of color, surprise, surprise, right? That's in everything that I read, and kids with disabilities. And so most recent numbers from the U.S. Department of Education civil rights data collection shows that while students with disabilities serve under IDEA make up only 13% of the total enrolled population in the country, they represent the majority of students who were physically restrained and secluded. And while K-12s have overall, over the time, have decreased the use of out-of-school suspensions, Black learners and students with disabilities remain twice as likely as their peers to be suspended, according to Child Trends analysis of federal data. So, so that was before the pandemic, right? And so now, here are some ways that they have found that discipline has stayed the same and has changed. So you can see why that has caught my eye, right? Remote settings have made traditional disciplinary measures more challenging. Boy, is that a true fact, right? When you're in person, you have access to more coercion tools, which, you know, to me, that's one of those things that we have got to train our adults to get better at, moving away from that punishment thing, right? And so the thing of spatial proximity, you remember that, right? It's a gift and a curse. We can move towards a kid who's talking, and they may understand that it's time to sort of be quiet and focus on work, but our spatial proximity could also intimidate students, right? And so we have to know our students well enough to understand when we can use something as simple as that when we're face to face. We don't have that in a virtual world, right? But despite the virtual world, we're still hearing some disturbing things. For example, they were referring to an incident in October in Louisiana where a teacher reported a student having a gun in the child's bedroom. Well, of course, it wasn't a real gun; it was a toy gun, and yeah, we have still a toy gun culture as far as kids growing up, right? And so having a water gun, having a BB gun, those are still part of kids' cultures in a lot of families. And so that was it was one of those things that it got to the child, almost expelling the child, instead of it being one of those things that could be easily explained by the parent, right? It should not get to that point. And teachers are actually using, in some cases, the muting of microphones and the turning off of student cameras as punishment. Well, it makes sense. On one hand, you know, teachers feel like they can sort of shut a child down who's talking too much or so forth. That can't be the only tool that the teacher uses online, right? Because over time, what's going to happen? That child's going to stop talking altogether, right? And not show up. So those are those cases where we need to make sure we're building the relationship with kids so that we can talk to them privately about maybe sharing the virtual space, right? Have you had to do that? Do you have any space hogs virtually?
Well, I think most of the students know that you stay on mute until you're going to, I mean, that's just kind of the norm that in every meeting people are on mute and then they unmute to speak, then they mute again. Otherwise, we have all of our devices that are present interfering with one another, and it makes really loud, yucky noises, the reverb. So they don't do that. What tends to happen more is they don't ever unmute and they won't talk. And so when you say, "So, Johnny," and then you click the little button ask to unmute and they won't unmute, and so they're digging their heels in that way, refusing to participate that way. That's more of a problem than them not stopping talking, because they don't talk unless they come off mute. They don't want to come off mute a lot of the times. So that's
Is
probably
that is that more of a middle school problem? Because I've heard from my elementary teachers that
oh, middle school kids don't do blah blah blah. Now they do blah 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 if they're in person, but on a Zoom, they don't want to. They hope you don't call on them, and they don't want to unmute and be. They feel like everybody's staring at them because you have a screen full of all these faces. At least at first, in my class, at least I hope now it's way less of an issue because they'll have kids high-fiving. I have kids high-fiving each other or doing this because I value the cheering each other on. And we're an IB campus too, so we're not supposed to do everything by the book the way a regular school does. We are supposed to be using those rubrics and the process and the journey and how do we develop your thinking and the lens you're using. So they might say, wow, way to be a risk taker, because that's one of our profiles. So it sounds kind of canned, but to be honest, we were doing that in person too, because they're middle schoolers and they're jaded, they're eighth graders, but they even see it feels better when I say, ooh, way to be a thinker, or way to be, they're squirmish at first, but then when the first time someone tells them, wow, that was a very caring, that's one of our profiles, that was caring, they stop and look like, wow, nobody says that. It's weird to see their transformation when they get used to complimenting each other. That's not something a normal eighth grader does. They actually realize the humanity that they are showing to each other and how it feels to receive that back. I wish all kids were taught just to be nice. How about that? Just be nice and value each other's efforts. So I don't have that particular thing happening that you mentioned with the mute. Yeah.
well, that's good to know. And I think, and you haven't said it, but you're building a relationship with kids, and that just jumps off the page in this article that schools are doubling down on relationships to make sure that kids feel that the schools care, right? That the teacher cares, and it depends. Different kids need different amount of caring. There are, and it refers in here to multi-tiered levels of support that are gaining traction as alternative solutions to punitive discipline. And that is, for example, many of our kids who haven't been online yet needed to have somebody from the district go knock on their door and go bring them a hotspot, or go just show that they cared enough to say, we miss you in school, please get online. We can't do school without you. We won't do school without you, right? And so there's so many kids that we've had to do that for. We have knocked on so many doors. You know, but again, that relationship building is the key. So talk about some of your tougher kids. You said you've got kids you've never seen before, but because they've hidden their screen. But how do you build a relationship with those kids?
Well, there's two that their device that they're using the camera doesn't work. And so they're actually two of my top students. So there's no reason for me to believe that they are using a computer that the camera does work, because they'll unmute and they'll speak a lot. I just can't see them. So it could be that their camera works and they just don't want to unmute, but I don't really think that's the case with the two. The people that I've never seen, that have never come to class, we do have to send the liaisons out and knock on doors. And sometimes they'll show up for a Zoom or two and then they go off the radar again. And then, we've got to try and hunt them down. By now, most of the kids are coming because I would stay till around 8:30 at night making calls in the beginning. I mean, calls and calls and calls. I've got pages and pages of logs. And I heard some parents say, so-and-so, Johnny, your science teacher's calling again. Again? Is she ever going to stop calling? I go, no, I'm not stopping calling. And I said, can you put him on the phone? And she wants to talk to you. Why? And I said, hey, like you said, I just can't stop calling because I want to meet you. I haven't met you and I've heard such great things. I was asking your last year's teacher and she said, oh my gosh, really? You've never met them? they show up. The smallest little thing, I usually tell the parent, can you put the kid on? And then I'll say, can I send a Zoom link? And I say, hey, I'm Miss Smith. I want you to be in this class. I put you on the seating chart and you're not here. And I'm just disappointed every time I look there and you're not here. They say, no one ever told me that. Like you said, no one ever told me that.
I'm going to think that you didn't have many discipline problems before the pandemic, but let's hear from other teachers in your building, because I'm hearing from other teachers that we're just not having the discipline problems in the building. I mean, we're having more discipline trying to find kids and getting them online,
Right.
and actually having problems in the building. How about y'all?
Yes, that is hard to get the kids to come online. I've also got kids who don't want to even show up for the Zoom, and it just takes a lot of legwork. I instantly email your mom, your dad, your grandma, Aunt Edna, however many. I gather that, and they send emails and they text me, and I'll say, "Oh, he's not on. Jaden's not on today. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get him out of bed. He overslept." And they know, well, you better get out of bed because she's gonna text me at work. Yes, I am. But they know that that's because I missed. I said, would you rather that I didn't notice you were here or not? Because I notice immediately when you're not in your little box. And that goes a long way. So I think the discipline needs to be flipped on its head. You really need to show the kids what you think is, I'm calling to get you in trouble. I'm calling so that you don't think we forgot about you. Some of these kids are really depressed and they come in with the deer in the headlights, look like they haven't been out of the house in almost a year now. And it isn't that they don't care about school, is they don't feel connected to anyone. They don't feel connected. School doesn't seem relevant. They've not seen their family. They can't see their grandparents. They weren't allowed to go anywhere for the holidays. They'd always go to Mexico and they couldn't go. They feel like the rug has been yanked out from under them. They have no context anymore for life. And I've had my own kids, my own daughters, top students start plummeting. I had to change schools so she could go face to face because we were at a different campus so that they could stand on the corner, get the bus and go to the little local school, which isn't as, as accomplished of a school, however you want to say it. But she needed to actually have a teacher she could interact with and talk to. Very GT kids. It's not always just the low kids that we talked about. The very GT kids, they really need to talk their head off and be told that they're working hard and get feedback. Just looking at these videos on these platforms, the Edgenuity videos they would play. She'd sit there crying one day. I said, what's the matter? She goes, I don't know what this lady said. It was a video, not her teacher, just whoever it is that makes the videos. I don't know, but by the time I meet in person with my teacher on Friday, I won't remember what I don't know. I don't know what I don't know by then. And I said, I got to get you back to school. You need to be able to go, wait, but I don't know what this is. Why did you do that? And so some of these kids have broken hearts right now, and we don't need to make it worse by who's a zero. I'm passionate.
And that's a whole different show right there.
Yeah.
So we talked about a lot. We even though we talked about grading, we talked about discipline, it all ends up about the relationship that the teacher is making effort to have with the student and with the parent. And parents, what does that mean for you? Is this a show just for educators? No, it's not, because if you are not getting the type of response from your teachers, from your child's teachers, as you're hearing you should get from a master teacher, then it may be that you have to become a stronger advocate for your own child. And so, I'm all about advocacy, but advocacy at different levels, right? So in this case, if you are not getting the type of response from each and every one of your children's and child's teachers, because each child, especially in secondary, has 7 or 8 teachers. And I will tell you that what I'm seeing as tribunal magistrate is, if a kid at home likes a teacher, they get on. If they don't like him, they don't get on. And so you see a very obvious trend for those teachers that are not student-centered as opposed to those that are. And so if you happen to have some 1 or 2 not student-centered teachers, then I've certainly become an advocate for your child in a very professional way. If you're not sure how to do that, let me know. I'm the Ask Dr. Be Good, right? If you need some professional dialogue help, if you need to know how to reach out to your school because you don't have the words, I'm your guy as far as helping you know how to become a better advocate for your own child. I talk about advocacy at a state level as far as how you as parents can help us with your legislators. But for right now, I'm asking you to become an advocate for your own child when it comes to making sure that each of your child's teachers are that student-centered type of teacher who is reaching out if and when your child is not reaching out first. Okay, so that's the message that needs to be carried to our parents and grandparents today. All right, well, thank you, Karla. As always, time is never our friend.
Mhm.
So thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing your insights from the field. I hope that we've left everyone a little bit more educated in some of the good things and interesting things that are happening in public education across the country. We have lots of politics going on. We have different practices that are being learned and then shared, which is fantastic because we can all learn from each other during this pandemic time. But mostly, I hope that everyone left with an understanding of how we need to work together to help our kids become stronger learners, help our parents, grandparents, and educators become stronger advocates for public education, because, as always, if we don't serve these children well, they will not serve us well as tax-paying citizens in the future. So thank you, everyone, for spending time with us this morning at 8 a.m. Remember, if you missed the broadcast, you can hear it at 6 p.m. on Thursdays. And leave your comments, leave your questions. And if you weren't on during the live time, it's okay. I'll still answer your questions.